biggest thing is the ability to make an impact.
From that moment onwards, we moved from being a brand that advertised to a brand that communicated.
We collaborate with our clients, and over time, we try and get them to fire us.
You must have to have really difficult conversations.
I want to see no office wall. I want to see everything covered in ideas.
There's so much data available that you can kind of get dazzled by it. And
I have.
What the hell are you doing?
Hello, my name's Katie Sando and welcome to the Marketing Forum podcast, where we persuade marketers, communicators, creatives and business people to share their knowledge with us. Helen Dunnett is a CRM consultant. She in particular works with the art sector and charities, and she joins me to chat about how organisations and businesses should be approaching CRM. So things like how to avoid the classic errors, silos, over-communicating, which is terrible, or under-communicating, which is also bad, the importance of managing stakeholders, why you shouldn't start with this system but instead with a strategy, etc, etc, etc. And we also talked to her about her experience of setting up as a consultant and her top tips around that. I really hope you enjoy.
Hello, Helen. Thank you so much for joining me on the Marketing Forum podcast.
That's a pleasure. I'm delighted.
She doesn't sound it. So, Helen, you are an expert in CRM?
Yes, I would say so. I've become one for sure.
Tell me about how you got started then, because you are now, if I'm not mistaken, a consultant around CRM.
That's right, yes.
You obviously didn't start there.
No. I mean, my career started many moons ago. And I actually started out my career in publishing, in music publishing. And I did that for a bit and then realized that wasn't quite the thing. And I moved into arts administration. And for a lot of years, I worked in arts organisations in marketing and communications. So I was heading that up ultimately in a number of different arts organisations. So orchestras. I did work for several orchestras and 2 or 3 venues as well. And then about 2010, I kind of had enough of organizations and to be honest, the sort of politics and the not always agreeing with the vision, and so I decided to make the break I should say, and become a consultant. And I guess when I first started, I was doing some marketing mentoring and stuff, and I still do a bit of that. But I've very much gravitated towards working with people on their customer relationship management strategies and the systems that they might need to help them with that. Yeah.
So when you were working in organisations within marketing, so was CRM through that really quite a big part? So CRM was owned by marketing in the organisations you worked with? Yeah,
I'd say probably at the time I was working in organisations, people didn't really understand what CRM was. It wasn't really a thing so much. I mean, even though the term was coined in 1995, I don't think people were really thinking about it in that way or really understanding it. It was more, there was a marketing strategy and there was potentially, audience development strategy that went with that. And that's how people sort of considered it. And it tended to be a bit sort of siloed, a bit the marketing department's thing and not seen as a sort of senior management thing, which was important for the whole business. And I was certainly, when I was in organizations, pushing against that and saying, actually, it's important that everybody thinks about this because the audiences are important to everybody.
So in terms of that, from a strategy perspective, what's your I guess what I want to understand is, what's your view of the perfect way of using and developing that an organisation, I suppose, thinks about it at different levels?
Yeah, I mean, certainly when I talk to organisations now, I always start at that strategic level. And so we don't start talking about systems because as far as I'm concerned, the systems is just a means to an end. The strategy's got to be there. It's got to be in place. And people have got to understand it's not just a marketing thing either, that it's actually across the business. And so I like to talk to people about, so what are your overarching sort of business objectives, and alongside that, what are your customer relationship management objectives? What are the things that as an organization you want to deliver and want to sign up to?
It's so it's funny because I think that you almost never come across a business that loves their CRM. Their CRM is often like a thorn in the side, but I also feel like you don't come across businesses that are often they're using like I'm an absolute classic for this with any tech. I could still probably get away with using a Nokia 3310 because what I use tech for is like the minuscule bit, whereas like CRMs do so much, don't they?
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's often because it is a bit siloed. So it's seen as either, in arts organizations, it's sort of marketing's thing, and box office if it's a venue, maybe development, fundraising a bit, but it's not seen at the top level necessarily as you have to take ownership of this, because it's actually a strategic thing. The system isn't just a thing, a thing in of itself. It's to help you realize your strategy. And that's often where people, they start with the system and try to shove it in to make it fit. And then of course it maybe doesn't, and they don't like it, and it doesn't deliver what they want.
Yeah. How do you stop it being siloed then?
Well, I think that's it's a massive challenge. And it's not just, it's big and small organizations. When I have those discovery conversations, they openly admit, most organizations, that things are siloed. And I think in part that is because it's not always driven from the top. There isn't a kind of leadership sort of ownership of it, and so people's natural instinct is, I'm doing fundraising, so I'm just focusing on that, and these people are just my contacts, and actually they're not, because Mr. Jones, who you've got a £10,000 donation from, might also be someone who attends lots of things and has done a workshop with you, but it's kind of not appreciated at that sort of strategic level. It's just people dealing with their own contacts.
So in that instance, do you end up with people who are contacting, so Mr. Jones wouldn't be heard from in a performance marketing capacity and would only be talked to about more money?
Or yes, that, or what quite often happens is over communicating. So not having a sort of organizational communication strategy, but marketing going, oh, we need to send out all these emails, and Mr. Jones is one of them, and fundraising going, oh, we've got this big appeal campaign, Mr. Jones gets that as well, possibly even on the same day.
Okay, right. So this complete lack of coordination in terms of how people are being contacted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I do think CRM does often get kicked into marketing from a kind of please solve this problem perspective.
Yes, definitely.
So I guess I really want to pick your brains then around, so if one of our dear listeners is in that position whereby, CRM very much seen as a marketing tool, potentially, like you say, either also a sales tool or whatever. How do you think that you really do have to try and develop an overarching strategy that you then get leadership to buy into?
Yes, I do. Yeah. And I think that if you're considering, because often I come in when people are saying, well, the problem is, we just want to change our system. And I very much try to reorient people to say, well, can we have everyone involved? Can we have the CEO? Can we have everyone involved in this conversation? Because actually, the initial discovery around this is not just about system, and most organizations that they take that on board and they do involve everybody at every level. Some take more ownership than others, but I always try to kind of take that tack with it, and it's there's a responsibility there. It's a shame that it falls on the marketing team to persuade the senior management team that that's something they need to consider, but it is often driven from them.
I was going to ask you if it's okay around like that conversation to get buy-in with the CEO.
Yeah, and you mean having that conversation as an external, or you mean internally the team sort of needing to have that?
Both. Yeah. How do you do, like, is there a particular so if from a CEO perspective they're just thinking it's just the CRM, it's just a system. What is the language you might use, or what is the angle you might take to say, yes, okay, it's just a system in itself, but it underpins how you're reaching your audiences? Yeah,
I mean, from my perspective, I kind of work really hard with whoever my contact is to encourage them to make sure that senior team is in that initial meeting, and I don't talk about the system element of it at all to start with, and I kind of, it's almost like a bit teachery.
Yeah.
So I kind of reinforce that, it's a customer relationships management is about building relationships with your customers, your visitors, your audiences, whoever those people are, and that actually you need to tell me about what you're trying to achieve as a business, and you need to engage with me at that level, because getting a system in of itself is great, but if it's the wrong one because we don't know why you're using it and what for. So I try to kind of engage with them about why it's not a good idea to just come in from we just need a system to do stuff tack, and to try and kind of talk more broadly about what customer relationship management is, and try to get the buy-in from that perspective, really.
Why do you think it's so important, particularly for arts organisations?
I think it's important for all organisations, really. I mean, it's perhaps a slightly different focus for arts organisations, but I think probably because a lot of arts organisations are, have very small, tight budgets. They have small staff teams. They're quite overstretched, and they need aside from the strategic thing about what it's achieving, they need to have systems that are going to help them be fleet of foot, to reduce their workload of doing lots of manual things where they've got spreadsheets and they're doing this and doing that, and passing information, and try to reduce that so that they can, be more strategic and do more important things about connecting with audiences.
I guess as well, they've got a lot of arts organisations are fundraising, they are trying to sell performances, they are potentially doing community outreach work as well, and it's the fact that their system probably does have to work really quite hard across, like you say, multiple strands.
Exactly. There are those multiple functions, and more with the fact that arts organizations are having to be quite commercial, really, far more than they might have been, even if they're charities, because grant funding is not cutting it. So they're kind of trying to bring, like you say, fundraising into that system, marketing and ticketing into that system, CRM, obviously at the center, but also retail in some instances, right. And cafe type, if there is a venue, then bringing those things in. And more arts organizations don't want to know more about their audiences and what they're actually doing. So they don't want their cafe or their shop disconnected, because they can't tell then whether members are spending a lot in the shop, or whether they could do more kind of packaging products and things together. And so they're kind of trying to be more thoughtful about that.
Is that generally, when you're working with clients, the biggest opportunity that you see for them?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they've probably to a certain extent identified some of these things themselves, but I think that they're not always sure that they can join those things together. And I think a big opportunity for them is to think more about their data. Often that's not totally thought through, what they're collecting, why they're collecting it, whether it's, it conforms with data protection. There's lots of that. And then there are a lot of issues that arise around just really bad processes, really kind of manual, unstreamlined, duplicated processes. And they can then suddenly see, actually, we could sort these out. We could sort some of these things out.
God, do you find yourself being called in to help with a system and then end up having to go through process, having to go through strategy, and it turns into a monster?
Yeah. And I actually, sometimes I have clients who say, "Oh, we just need a new system," and I think they think, "Oh, if I get a new system, it'll all be solved. It'll all be," and quite often, I mean, I may well be doing myself out of work, but quite often it's more a review of the system they've got, because I think many don't consider what a massive change project it is, and also a massive investment, and it's not just a case of, we'll switch that off and just switch something else on. And so I quite often say, well, maybe this is more of a review about the system you've got and whether it really doesn't fulfill your needs. And that's when it often throws up those things about siloed teams and poor internal processes and all of those sorts of things.
It's a very helpful lens, isn't it, to actually not just reviewing the system, but actually reviewing the entire coherence between communications between those different audience groups and their needs.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
People probably just think, I can just imagine like the CEO being like, "Oh, let's sort out our CRM this year." And then not realizing that actually what he's doing is unleashing a beast upon the world.
Indeed.
I've just assumed he for CEO. Do you see how I did that?
Yes. He or she.
Exactly. Or they. How awful.
Yes.
And that was really, anyway. So I suppose I just would like to pick your brains further around how people could do this. So obviously, in many ways, I think actually working with an external partner would be incredibly helpful, because it helps create that distance as well, doesn't it, between what any one siloed group of people thinks?
Yes. And I think that's why I never launch straight into, right, let's do a functionality specification and write down all the things that we want the system to do, because it's just, we're such a, for the reasons I've said before about the strategic focus. But I think that I like to have a period of discovery that's beyond that initial high level meeting, detailed meetings with teams, and lots of massively valuable information comes out from those, and it makes people really start to think about, it's not just we're going to do a few kind of demos of systems and away we go. It does bring up all kinds of other things about what they might want to do.
Do you get involved in that as well then? So if you realize that there's issues with maybe like even how they're communicating, or is that
sometimes, yes. I did a big project with Shakespeare's Globe, and I did help them do their procurement of their system, etc. And then I think that they thought, oh, we'll just get Helen to help us implement the system. And then they kind of thought, oh, well, maybe that's not the best use of her expertise. So they got somebody else in, because it was more just project management, really. And they said, what we'd really like you to do, because it was the year that GDPR came in.
Oh, I remember that year.
Yeah. Well, they got me to help them. We created a data policy for the organization, and that was a big piece of work. And we did a data impact protection assessment, DPIA, I think, they're called. And we did all of that kind of work. And so it was a slight kind of divergence from what they'd originally thought they were going to use me for in that phase of the project.
Oh, that's so interesting. So, and presumably you do see massive impact for organisations on. So I'm guessing outputs of where this goes well is, okay, they get a new system, but actually they also start to see improvements, particularly in fundraising, presumably? Yeah,
I mean, I think the thing that you said before, that sort of communications thing, because, that's really important across it, but for fundraising as well, about what the plan is and who they're contacting and why and how they're segmenting their audience and all of that. Yeah.
Do you still come across businesses that don't even have a CRM?
I'm trying to think. Yes. I have come across very small organizations probably who just kind of operated a bit on spreadsheets and Google Sheets and things. Yes, I do.
Because even when you start talking about how it's siloed and stuff, I think about how, for example, things like contacts for a business's contacts for things like events or politically stakeholder management. I often see that not included at all. Like that will be in a CEO or in their mind.
Yes.
I used to have a chief exec who every time we did an event, it would take about 3 weeks to try and mine them for who should come because it wasn't anywhere.
No, that's come up. Actually, it's interesting you say that. That's come up twice in 2 projects I'm working with at the moment about that. And a kind of, because we've been having these discovery sessions, a light bulb, well, we have all these other contacts. And now I think about it, they're either, like you say, in the CEO's head or in somebody's email or wherever. And it's a nightmare. And I think there's a realization that the reason for that is because there's no person who's sort of taking responsibility for it in updating, managing and dealing with those contacts. They sort of fall out of the natural, oh, these are my fundraising contacts, these are my marketing contacts. Yeah. And actually they're just as important. They begin to see. And so I've had both those organizations thinking, well, is there another way that we should be dealing with this?
Yeah, because I think stakeholder management for all businesses is becoming increasingly important. Like it used to be that you could innocently operate within the private sector and go about your business. But if you're serious about growth and development, you do need to engage with potentially the public sector, potentially with political stakeholders or whatever it may be. It's no longer just a case of you can no longer thrive with just a client-based audience, I don't think.
No, absolutely not. And with arts organisations, perhaps even more, because the funding is so important and they need to be connected to those influencers and people who might donate and so forth. So, yeah, and I think that there's maybe a thing about, I don't want these contacts on my CRM because some people who shouldn't see them might see them.
They're going to steal my contact.
Or they might delete it, or they might contact them when I don't want them to. I know there was a big thing when I worked for a theatre company where they were saying, we don't want the actors on there because, they're actors and we don't want them just being mailed about a show. And it's like, but they're not just actors. They may well have come to some of your shows. And I think when there's a bit more of an understanding about actually, particularly from fundraising, you can limit the access to certain aspects of a system and a record. So you can not show that someone's given you £1 million, but you can show that they're a donor to the people who need to see that, so that they know they're important person, and that when they come to the venue, they need to be kind of looked after.
Prosecco.
Yes, exactly. So I think a bit more of that understanding filters through. Well, actually, you can do that. You can bring all those contacts together. They don't need to sit with the chief executive. It's just about how you manage them and who you what access you give within the system.
It's humanizing people as well, isn't it? I do see this a lot with businesses where it's like, oh, why would businesses be interested in this? And you think, okay, businesses might not, but businesses are populated by people with families and children and partners, and they are interested as human beings. It's like you say with the actors, it's like, well, that might be their occupation, but they probably have a life outside of it.
Yeah. And they might have kids who want to come to a family thing at the theatre where they do their shows, and why wouldn't they want to be contacted about that just because they're actors?
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Sorry, exactly. You can't come to this due to your occupation.
Yes.
I was just going to ask you as well about personalization. So, something that particularly obviously with in the marketing world, we see a huge amount of move towards the need to be much more personalized with how we communicate, when, about what, etc. Is that something that arts organisations and the work that you're doing is coming up now in those kind of discovery conversations?
Oh yeah, absolutely. When they say what are the things we want from a system, personalization is a thing. Ability to segment the data really well and to tag it really well, so that they know more things about people and they can pull different segments for different reasons. Absolutely. Yeah.
Are you seeing then the CRMs as well, or have they already massively made strides in developing that? Because one of the conversations, particularly I think with SME businesses around from a marketing angle, is we all know that we need to personalize. It's actually very difficult to do. It can be quite expensive. But presumably that will improve as CRMs it becomes a bit more sort of ubiquitous.
Yeah, and I think, in the arts world there've been a number of companies that have developed sort of segmentation systems, and they are seeing that connecting with the system, the ticketing or CRM system, to be able to associate segment types against a particular person's record is really important. And so there is work on that basis. Yeah, for sure, in the arts. And there's a big program that's kind of linked to the Arts Council called Audience Finder, which again, it hooks into people's systems and it can pull out the data and provide them with quite a bit of insight and some profiling around the type of customers they are, where they live, and so forth. Yeah.
Do a lot of CRMs do profiling?
You've got to be a bit careful about it because of GDPR.
I know. Also, people are getting way more funny about being profiled.
Yeah. What they tend to do, there's a system that I kind of work quite closely with the company that created it, which is about psychographic segmentation, and they've done a lot of research in the market about people's approach and reaction to communications and what they like and what they don't like and so forth, and they've created these segments, and the way that they, I suppose, profile them, if you like, is that customers get asked 3 what they call golden questions, which they've obviously researched about how they can then attach this, and then it attaches a certain segment type, which means that the person is more of that type. That's not saying that they're not within any other, but what segmentation is like. You can categorize people but it has its limits. And so, there'll be like culture finders. I can't remember the names of them now, but, they've got particular names. And then that if the database is linked with those questions, then that code gets associated to them. And when people are doing communications, they can say, can I find all my experience seekers on the database? Because I know if I write to them with this tone of voice, with this kind of language, they're more likely to respond to what I'm saying, to my messaging, rather than just a broadcast, same tone, same thing message to everybody.
Yeah. That'd be the dream.
Indeed.
I really want to know what the questions are now. You probably can't tell me.
I can't. I probably shouldn't tell you.
No, I was going to say.
It's their trade secret.
I know, right? Exactly. Although they've got a huge amount of backup of research, no doubt, and psychology to use.
Yeah.
So once you get past the strategic piece, the CRM system itself, is that literally just a question of saying, what's our wish list? What's our budget? And let's find somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, it's kind of. We do, when we've done that sort of discovery, then I do tend to then hone down on, right, let's create a functional specification of requirements, and let's look at what is absolutely essential that you have to have, what's a sort of more desirable element, and what are things that are quite useful, but it wouldn't be a deal breaker if they weren't in the system. And we kind of do that and build a specification. And then I have a little tool that I can match to suppliers, or most suppliers, and the ones that are not within that system, I tend to know about anyway, and can kind of make suggestions. So we then come up with a kind of long list of, these are the potential suppliers that sort of match your requirements. So it kind of works like that, really.
And people have a little bit of a demo.
And then people will have a demo, yeah, we'll kind of have a discussion about, like you say, costs. So I've got a pretty good idea of which systems are higher cost, or might be higher cost, medium cost, lower cost, and then we kind of have a demo on that basis, yeah, and have it.
Have you seen that MailChimp's kind of developed a bit of a CRM arm?
Haven't really kind of investigated that much. No, most of the people that I work with tend to get their CRM ticketing system, and then they most of those systems will have a integration with maybe MailChimp or Campaign Monitor or one of the other ones, and they'll work on an integration so that the data always sits in the main system, and it's an export to MailChimp. Do you a nice newsletter, and it writes back the unsubscribes, etc., etc. It tends to work like that.
I can't remember what I was looking at the other day, and I just remember I saw that MailChimp had started developing much more kind of CRM. They were kind of trying to become more of a, I suppose it'd never be very difficult for them to become an all-in-one marketing tool, but much more of a kind of full-service marketing tool.
Yeah.
And I was just interested in whether or not you'd seen it. I've seen people try to use MailChimp as a kind of CRM before, and it doesn't really work.
No.
No,
it doesn't.
They don't really. No, they don't have the segmentation side of it,
and you don't have the insights, and you can't attach this. For people who's selling, it's hard to attach the sales, and you want to see, who's bought what, when, what else did they do? Not just whether they responded to the communications, but all of those kind of other parts of their engagement.
Are you a total geek around the analytics of this stuff?
Oh, yeah, I could seriously be, yeah. But what I always counsel people is, don't go down a rabbit hole of data. Oh, this is interesting. Or this could be quite interesting.
Yeah.
It can be a bit of a, I'm just finding things out for the sake of finding them out because I can.
Yeah. Or
but I have a tendency, because I love all that. Yeah.
Oh, Helen, you geek.
I know. Terrible.
So the only other thing I was going to sort of ask you as well is around with if you're if you're a tiny business, like a one-man band or, sole trader, I guess, how would you, I mean, obviously it's not cost. Do you think that CRMs are essential, really, even when you're that small? Or if not essential, do you really think that you should start collect up some of that stuff?
I think it is a matter of scale, I think, a bit. I mean, I'm a sole trader. I don't have a CRM because my clients are I don't have thousands of them. I have a smaller number, and that works for me.
Yeah.
Because of the ratio of what I do. But I guess if you're selling thousands of people, then that becomes more a management issue. I can manage with a very good email solution, where that's where my mailing list sits, and it's got plenty of automation function on it. So I think it's that sort of scalable thing. You might get to a certain point where you think, I can't manage all my contacts just on my email solution, and I can't gain any insight, particularly if you're selling products as well.
Yeah, exactly. You need to understand habits, not just behavior, I suppose. Yeah,
it's very easy for me to track my clients and what they did with me because it's not vast numbers.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
So I think that's the measure, really.
And on the only other thing I was going to ask you, I said that last time, I'm interested in your kind of, from a consultant's perspective, I suppose if there's anybody listening that wants to become a consultant or wants to understand kind of more of what it's like, what's been your journey around it?
Yeah, that's a really good one. I think, I mean, I'm just probably think about it in terms of lessons I've learned, because I think that, there's things mistakes I've made. And I think that one of them was not really seeing that being visible was as important as it is. And for a few years when I first started, I was quite well known in the industry. And so I perhaps over-relied on contacts and referrals. And, that's a good thing to do, but I think not on its own. And I think the really big thing was not appreciating what it's like to be suddenly on your own and without a support network, without having a chat with your colleague, down the corridor, without networking with like-minded people. And I kind of didn't appreciate that and didn't really do that, and then felt very isolated. So I think those are things to be really aware of. And also I think a sort of not investing in or not seeing investment in the business as being as important as it is either.
That was my other question, is what were your experience around how you find the balance between, building new work, but also doing the work? Because I think that's the hardest thing when you're small business or sole trader, is you can't ignore the work you've got, because otherwise you can't pay your bills and you'll really annoy the people that you've got. But also, that you need to keep building. How do you manage that balance?
Yeah, I hear so many of my other consultant colleagues saying the similar thing, because if you are a sole trader, it's really hard because you're the person delivering, and as you say, you're kind of focusing, and then but you don't want to be in a position where you think, I haven't got any work now because I was so busy doing this particular contract or whatever. So I don't know that there's a perfect answer to that. No. But I think that the fact that I've engaged some help in the last sort of 18 months has made that a bit easier, because I was finding that I wasn't tracking when inquiries were coming in very well, and I was kind of letting those slip, and then thinking, oh my gosh, I haven't responded to that person. And so having that person to help me track that, keep that on track, follow those people up, chase them or whatever, write the proposals, that's been a massive help.
Do you want to grow, or are you happy being a consultant, or do you want to develop a team?
I'd like to grow. I am still considering whether I think at the moment, I don't really want to employ people so that I'm employing them and paying their PAYE and all of that. Don't think I want to do that just now. But what I have been doing is trying to develop some associates.
Sure.
Yeah. So I've got one associate consultant that I've worked with a few times, and I'm potentially looking for somebody else to work with on the sort of more the project management of implementing the systems as well. So definitely looking at that sort of model.
It's so interesting, isn't it? Because it's so like there's so many benefits to consulting and freelancing. I think you learn more quickly because you're moving between businesses and projects more quickly, which means you're starting to get an understanding more quickly of business, commercial, strategy, operations, people, teams. I think that stuff's all great, but as you say, then there are huge challenges as well. It's interesting, isolation, and it does depend on your character, doesn't it, and what you want to do.
Yeah, I mean, I'm quite good at just being on my own and getting on with it, but I did start to really feel that, and I've done something about it, and it's been massively helpful. Yeah. So
I think there's the quotes that you see around who you surround yourself with in terms of making a difference to what you get and what you're doing. I really do think that's true. I think you do need to surround yourself with people that help you get to where you can't, I suppose, what am I trying to say? You need to be around great people to be great deliverer, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I'm seeing the benefits of that, of doing that. And that's probably in the last 4 or 5 years that I've kind of tried to change that. Yeah.
It takes its time, doesn't it?
It does. Yeah, it sure does. It doesn't happen overnight. That's for sure.
And that's I think the depressing bit sometimes as well, when you're like, this is what I want to do, and you know what you want to do, and then you just think like 6 months has gone. Why hasn't it happened yet? But it doesn't. It takes its time. And a lot of successful businesses, so even if they've been going 10 years, in a way, they're still babies.
Yeah. I think it's that. I don't know who said it, but it is the sort of incremental steps. I think it's just really important to not dismiss something. Oh, I still haven't achieved this thing. It's just to think, well, but have I made some steps?
Yeah, the progress
towards it. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us, Helen.
It's an absolute pleasure.
Both from a CRM perspective, and I feel like I slightly interrogated you around CRMs, but no, it was really useful, really interesting. If businesses are interested in working with you, you're not just arts organisations, are you?
No, I guess I'm probably more focused around the charity sector. So, that kind of a business. But I have worked with charities outside. So I did a project with Trees for Life, which is a charity and not an arts charity. So, but tends to be more the sort of not-for-profit kind of end of things, I would say.
Cool. Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
And I'm delighted.
I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Marketing Forum podcast. If you are not already, please do like and subscribe. And you can follow us on social media or subscribe to our mailing list to find out more about episodes coming your way soon.